people are moving over from the Vitro Challenge, but we're going to go ahead and get started. One of the things we've said a number of times through this conference is we want to try to simulate all the cool things that happen at an in-person conference, even though we're living virtually. And that's kind of been the meme at Carnegie Mellon for since March, right? How do we keep doing CMU with excellence, but under the conditions that we're operating in? And so one of the ideas we had is, one of the neat things I think at conferences is you meet interesting people and you get a chance to kind of hear different people's perspectives. And so we've done these 5x5s, or interviewing 5 interesting people with 5 questions. And to wrap it up, I've got a real treat. Dr. Michael McQuade is the Vice President of Research at Carnegie Mellon, which we'll get to this in a minute, but that's where the Schwartz Center reports up into. We're kind of part of the overall Office of Research. But before he came to Carnegie Mellon, he did a number of R&D and technology leadership positions. And Michael, I thought we would start there. So between Kodak, 3M, UTC, you had a number of different executive roles where you took early stage research and you turned that into business growth. And I guess to start with, what are some best practices from that you might share for other people who are in similar roles in other organizations?
Yeah, so thanks. Welcome to everybody. I'm still waiting for that part where the interesting person shows up here. But I would say a couple of things. And look, I had a career that went a lot of different places. I think the most important thing to try and do is understand the risk. So when I was at 3M, I was in the medical products where much of our product line was such that you could actually try something for almost no cost and determine if it worked. You could find spare coding capacity somewhere. You could make a product and get out and test it and see if it worked before you deployed capital, before you deployed significant human resources to making the business work. So when you can do that, that's the right thing to do. The flip side is later in my career when I was at UTC, we made critical safety of life components for aircraft. When your life depends on it, you can't just experiment a little bit. So I guess the message I would say is be very clear what risk you can take and take it. If you can, try it, fix it. Don't try and get it 100% right, but recognize when you have to do that.
Yeah, great. I think coming from the software space, it probably makes 3M, that's part of the thing for me. I'm just used to this sort of rapid prototyping, right? Because in software, you can do that. So some of your research was done internally, I'm sure, and some was done in collaboration with other organizations, universities, other companies, that kind of thing. How do you think companies should approach this build versus partner in the area of research?
Yeah, I think it's a hugely important question, especially now when research is being done in so many places. So the first thing I would say is, and there's a bit of DARPA catechism in here. I think every organization, the first question you have to ask is, what do I absolutely have to own? I have to own it because if somebody else owns it, they have me way too much over a barrel. I have to own it because there are national security reasons. I have to own it because I have the only people in the world who can actually do that. So start with those questions. Be very, very self-questioning about those questions, because people rapidly say, well, nobody else can do that but me, or, and then you have to ask yourself the question, can I rely on somebody else to do it? Not can they do it, but can I rely on them doing it? If the answer to those 2 questions is yes, and it is not something that you have to own, then take it outside, because there are too many opportunities to spend our own precious resources.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's get to CMU. So, there's probably a lot of easier things you could have done, but you chose to come to Carnegie Mellon and be our VP of research. What made you want to come back to Carnegie Mellon?
So I tell people, I retired and was happily retired. I was on the board at CMU, and what made me come back is I didn't walk fast enough. Farnham came walking by and started whispering in my ear. So the real reason is, if you do what I do for a living, which is help guide research, there is no better place to be in the world than the center of the things that CMU does and their impact on the world. And so coming back to the World Center for AI and Robotics and Autonomy and Learning Science and Neuroscience, it's a playground in the sense of not only is it intellectually interesting, but done right, it really, really matters. And so that was the criteria that brought me back.
And you didn't have running shoes on that day.
There we go.
So what research at CMU do you think doesn't have as much corporate partner attention as it should, and why?
So first of all, I think people I'm not going to argue the premise. People don't understand how much corporate attention we have on research.
Sure.
And that investment, in case people don't understand, that investment is growing at 50% higher rate than our government-sponsored research. So, and a lot of that has to do with how we're providing the care and feeding of our partners. But if I were to look at some of the things that, I mean, obviously things people know about are what companies show up for, robotics, autonomy, et cetera. There are a couple of things that I would say. First of all, I think all of the issues around the science of learning, which is this deep, deep understanding at CMU that led to so much, I think the application of that in the private sector is underestimated. So that's one. I think the issues around writ large, ethics, societal impact, the research associated with how the decisions you make as a company about your portfolio and about your way of doing business, how those impact your community and your customers and what you should do about it. Those are two areas I would call out.
That's awesome. Yeah. And most people know Mike Harding that are on here because of this being a CSL event, but like we absolutely have a fantastic corporate engagement center. But I do think people tend to think of us as like, oh, they do robotics and AI, and I just think there's other things, and those are two good examples of other things.
I think the other thing is, and for people on the phone, part of the change we've made under Mark Nolan, Mike Harding's leadership is to treat our partners as, I don't say this in a way that insults, but as a share of wallet. If you're coming here for research, why are you also not coming here for students? Why are you also not coming here for education? And so that business approach to our external partners is a big part of what we've been moving forward.
And they love it too, right? I mean, people want the talent that's here.
Exactly.
So absolutely win. Okay. So last one is, so the Schwartz Center, right? So everybody's been hearing all 6 days, CSL, part of the Schwartz Center. That also falls under your purview. I guess any startups you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out if I should tell you that I like one of my children better than one of my other children along the way, and probably not. As
a VC, let me tell you just have to do that, Michael. That's how this goes. So
yeah, but let me instead of talking about a very startup, let me tell you categories. The things I am very interested in right now are startups that are associated about monetizing, and I'm going to use monetizing with a small m because I mean monetizing in the dollars and cents point of view, but I also mean it very much in the impact point of view, because much of what we need to do as good investors and good startups is I have to make money, but I also have to have a reason to make money. Why do I do what I do? So monetization of information in healthcare. If COVID has taught us nothing else, it is about how tech needs to drive healthcare. And the corollary to that is not just healthcare, but equity in society writ large. So I am very, very interested in the startups that are related to, with a good business model and a good view, how we impact healthcare and then more broadly, equity in society. So those are two. And then the third one, which is sort of the blindingly obvious in this day and age, is at a point, COVID will be gone. There'll be a vaccine. We'll have testing. Everybody can have their own bet. The world will not just be what it was before. We have learned too much about operating remotely. So what is it that will come out of this? And rather than be solving a critical problem because I have to, because I'm in a crisis, what does remote operation enable for us as a go-forward position? So things that are related to how we make it easier for people to act remotely, how we make it for people to engage in person while being remote, how we bridge information flow backward. Those are the kind of startups that I am really kind of bullish on right now.
It's awesome. Well, Michael, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. You've been a great friend to Schwartz, and I appreciate your continued leadership here.
Thanks. Well, congratulations on a successful couple of days here too. So.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Sean.
All right, cool. Take care.